Good afternoon, everyone. I am Analea L. Penampang, and what I'm going to discuss today is the continuation of Miss Pambayabaya's report. Since she already discussed the first part, we will continue to discuss the second part of this chapter. Now, at the end of this session today, you will be able to understand the following. Migrants through Mexico onto the US, increased law enforcement, flow of migrants elsewhere in the world, and illegal immigrants in Europe. Each and every year, hundreds of thousands or millions attempt to cross into the US via the southern border without the legal right to do so. In short, they try to migrate illegally. Accordingly, in 2006, there are 170,000 illegal immigrants from Mexico, and many of them make their way illegally from various Central American nations to the US. Now, to get to the US, the vast majority must travel through much of Mexico and cross the Mexico-US border. One route is through Mexico's southern neighbor, which is the Guatemala, leading across the Suchiate River onto the city of Tapachula. Many use this river to transport goods, and others use it to migrate north. Also, to many, this is the gateway to the Mexico-US border. Those you would not found any wall here, since Suchiate River is an open border. They can freely cross this river whenever they want. Now, most migrants are traveling from Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, fleeing gangs and violence and corruption back home. From there, migrants undertake an arduous 1,500 kilometers to reach Texas, which is the shortest route to the US. During their journey to Mexico, they face the risk of extortion, kidnapping, physical and sexual assault. Some are resorting to a network of cargo freight trains known as La Bestia, where this is the last stage, involves a 250-mile walk. Now, they were swarmed abroad into these moving trains. They were on top of these trains and hung precariously from them en route to the US. Many are injured or die falling from the moving trains, and other also are targeted by criminals gangs who brought the trains and charge fee for travelers. If migrants do not pay, they can be beaten or threw off the train or left for dead. There's even one Honduran migrant who had his both legs shred off above the knees when he dozed off and fell from the train. He said, "I fell face down. At first, I didn't think anything had happened. When I turned over, I saw and I realized that my feet really didn't exist." He didn't notice at first that his legs was cut off up until he realized that his legs was snipped off out of a sudden. But that is not the only reason, because others are targeted by criminal gangs. There is also a migrant who had experienced extortion on his way to Mexico-US border. A 27-year-old man from Honduras, which it took him 11 days to walk from the Suchiate River to Arriaga with his companion to await the train. While there, he and several others were ambushed by three men, and one of these men is having a gun, having a machine gun. He said, they told us to lay down and take off our clothes. I lost my watch, about 500 Honduran lempiras, and 40 Mexican pesos, about $31. So, yet this man was undeterred, driven by hope of higher pay. Because back in Honduras, this man only earned $200 a month as a driver, while his brother in Arizona earned $700 a week as a carpenter. So you can really see the difference why they were so desperate to migrate in US, even though they already know that they are doing it in an illegal way. Now, the vast majority of these undocumented immigrants are not successful in their endeavor. An estimated of 55 to 85% of them are caught and sent back to their home country, but to many people, these odds are worth it. There is enormous economic disparity between the US, where average income is at 65,000, while in Mexico only have $9,500 per year. The US scores much better than Mexico also in social mobility. Many a poor people, a poor person rather, is more likely to become wealthier in their lifetime in the US than in Mexico. In short, while there are certainly nearly infinite reasons why someone might choose to migrate to the US, including quiet, often family reunification, or an escape from violence. Research has shown that money and the attempt to escape poverty is typically the strongest and primary one. So the question is, why don't people migrate to the US illegally? It would be certainly be safer. Well, the, the answer is they cannot. For some people, there is no legitimate route to legal status in the US, and to others, there is no practical way, and it is too expensive to migrate legally, which they can't afford. And accordingly, the wait time to have your visa process currently stands at 24 years. That means that now, for example, in 2020, let's say in 2020, they are currently only processing applications submitted up until 1990. So, ganun katagal, 24 years. So, that is why many people seeking and other classes of visas choose not to wait and rather take the faster yet riskier option of immigrating without authorization. In the past, most migration, especially from Mexico was a round trip journey. People would freely come back and forth. There were no like restriction. However, it is increasingly becoming one way as migrants settle, often illegally, into life in the US. There are several reasons for this. First is this: they are more likely to be able to get jobs outside for the agricultural sector. So such work in the US is less seasonal and more likely to be regular and stable. Second, making a return to Mexico is more difficult and more expensive. Third, with the tightening of border control since the 1980s and especially after 9/11, it is simply more difficult and more expensive to find a way to return to Mexico. Accordingly, according to one sociologist, the primary effect of hardening the border has been one of locking people in. Why? So, about 47% of illegal immigrants returned to Mexico in between 1979 and to 1984, but unfortunately, the percentage of returns had declined to 27% between 1997 and 2003. So, more illegally, thus one of the ironies of increased US border control is that more illegal immigrants from Mexico remain in the US rather than returning. So yan yung sinasabi na isang sociologist na the primary effect of hardening the border has been one of locking people in. So instead na umuwi sila, mas gugusto nila lang magstay. So in other words, due to the tightening of borders, illegal immigrants choose to stay in the US rather than go back to Mexico, where it will be more difficult for them to return because there is a possibility that they may not be able to return back to the US. And in 2007, before the US Mexico border is not as strict as it was in 2007. It was on 2007 when the controls on the 2,000-mile Mexican border with the US have continued to increase with thousands of new border patrol agents and National Guardsmen. And that control will be expected to increase still further when the 700-mile 12 to 15-foot high steel fence is completed. Before, during 1980s and 1880s, there was just a couple of strands of barbed wire, as you can see in the picture. Like you can easily climb off if you wanted to. It's just an open strip of land with train. Now, in the other picture, here it is same strange look like 110 years later in 2008. So ito na yung nabago nung before hanggang dito sa 2008. So the fence between the US border that was in existence in late 2010 as well as increased border patrol was said to have produced a 22% drop in apprehension of illegal immigrants at the border. But others claim that the drop may be at least in part the result of other factors. There are also questions as to whether such a fence is really useful given the terrain. Instead, that fence merely lead illegal immigrants to use other more dangerous routes into the US. Now, in addition, the control over the border became even more restrictive now than in the early years, and it started during the Trump administration, where he built a wall strengthening the border between the two countries. And this wall is already exists along almost 750 miles of the US-Mexico border with an impenetrable steel fence, walls, and barbed wire to keep out hundreds of thousands who cross into America illegally every year. Moreover, he put an unprecedented emphasis on border enforcement, border militarization, customs, and border patrols, and it is said to be composed of 60,000 agents, and 16 of these is stationed on the US-Mexico border to guard this border kung may papasok man na mga illegal immigrants. So you can really see the dynamic and the evolution of this border. Before, people could come and go at leisure and there were no issues. Now it's getting really difficult and really problematic. Some research says that the border wall wouldn't necessarily help. Now, the impact of increased enforcement of immigration law is being felt throughout the US, where natives engage in already marginal farming are increasingly threatened by the loss of their low-paid illegal immigrant workers from Mexico. But not only are the workers more likely to be picked up by immigration authorities, but the farmer owners themselves worry about criminal prosecution. There is a pervasive climate of fear also, as illegal workers are suspicious of everyone and farmers fear that jealous neighbor might inform the migration authorities that they are like um, hiring hiring such people. So natatakot sila na malaman ng immigration authorities na may hinahired para silang illegal immigration. So some of those who support a more stringent law enforcement do so out of concern for the immigrant workers, their low wage and their otherwise highly exploited status as farm workers. However, however, others do so because they feel illegal immigrants drag down wages for everyone and they resent the cost associated with the public service accorded to them. In contrast, native farmers tend to support the immigrant workers because they contend that they are unable to find anyone else to do the work. Migrants are also supported by those who are concerned that the human rights of illegal immigrants are being abused in the current crackdown. Above all, the result of increased law enforcement is that deportation rates are up dramatically. Now, it is not only in the US that control over borders, but other countries also does, like in uh, Great Britain, Switzerland, and Greece. Now, since the ratification of the Maastricht Treaty, a number of nations have been added to the European Union, including less developed Eastern European nations such as Poland, Bulgaria, and Romania. One of the key points of the Maastricht Treaty was to move toward Europe as an increasingly borderless society, at least as far as the member nation and their citizens are concerned. However, the influx of immigrants from the less developed East to the more developed West has led to major concern in a number of countries in Western Europe and calls by many for a reassertion of border controls. So, the first one is Great Britain. After the admission of new members, including Poland, to the European Union, Great Britain opened their doors to immigrants from those nations, and the result was an influx over 500,000 people. Predictability, these immigrants took many low-paying jobs and were perceived as a threat because the jobs they obtained might have gone to British workers. There are there are those who argue that the influx of low-wage immigrants aids a country like Great Britain by making its products less expensive and therefore more competitive in global marketplace. These immigrants also often take jobs that natives are reluctant to take because of the low wages or the intrinsic nature of the sorry sorry intrinsic nature of the work. Their low wages are also seen as tending to dampen the tendency toward inflation, and the taxes paid by immigrant workers help pay for public services. Now, in spite of such advantages, in 2008, the Prime Minister issued a call for British jobs for British workers, while then the operation leader of the Conservative Party was in favor of much lower rates of immigration into Great Britain. So, yung kinatatakutan ng mga illegal illegal immigrant workers na mapunta yung kanilang work sa mapunta yung kanilang works into British workers in 2008 is itinaga na talaga ng president, the prime minister. He issued a call for British job for British workers. So it is kind of way to also to pigilan yung mga illegal immigrants. So to take another example, in Switzerland, in 2007, the national election and the most powerful party, which is the Swiss People's Party, distributed a poster that depicted 3 white sheep standing on a flag with one of the white sheep kicking a black sheep away. So you can see here in the picture, the white sheep is kicking the black sheep. So the poster words means that to create security. So you can tell that the poster says something, right? So in other words, if they want to make Switzerland safer, I mean the people, if people want to make Switzerland safer and get rid of foreign criminals, these foreign criminals is they call the legal immigrants a foreign criminals, kasi most of these countries na pinupuntahan ng mga illegal immigrants is tinatawag nila itong mga criminals. So the only way is to do their own and vote yes for these Swiss peoples, to vote Swiss people. So the Swiss people use this poster to gain votes from people. So while has been distributed in a mass mailing to Swiss households. So ginawa ito ng Swiss People's Party, ginawa nila ito ng magazine, ng newspaper, they even put in a billboard. So ganyan yung kanilang ginawa to gain vote from people in Switzerland. And because of this controversial campaign, the poster lead to have much higher voter in the election in 2007. So lumaki nga yung vote nila, while they receive almost 30% of the vote and gain 7 seats to reach a total of 62 of the 200-seat parliament. And its closest competitor, the leftist Social Democratic Party, received less than 20% of the vote and lost 9 seats and was left with a total of 43 seats. Swiss people because of this poster. Now this vote was likely seen as an endorsement of the Swiss People's Party and was likely to lead it to push forward its conservative agenda, including more conservative policies in general, as well as toward immigration and asylum in particular. President Micheline Calmy says the poster is disgusting and unacceptable. He also added it stigmatizes others and plays on the fear factor, and in that sense it's dangerous. He said the campaign does not correspond to Switzerland multicultural openness to the world. So they used that poster to gain vote from the people para to create security. So in that sense, so pinipigilan nila na yung kanilang ang mga illegal immigrants to para pumunta sa kanilang country. So that is the way na pagpigil din to control the border, to control their border. So we have also here an example also, the Greece. Among the European countries are involved in a system called Frontex. These Frontex designed to police their borders. Frontex has patrol boats, spotter, airplanes, radar on land, and other high technology devices. So, a shorter route from Turkey is a shorter route to get from Greece is from Turkey, and it is therefore the gateway to the Middle East and Asia. So, itong shorter route na ito from Turkey is ito yung ginagamit ng mga illegal immigrants from Europe kasi ito ay shorter route lang at it is the newest shorter routes compared doon sa una na kanilang ginagamit na route para makapunta sa Greece. So, although it is a short dinghy ride from Turkey to Chios, the waters there are treacherous and the trip is quite dangerous. So, in spite of the dangerous and the cost of using intermediaries such as smugglers and lawyers, so bakit pa sila bumabad ng smugglers? It is because bumabayad sila ng mga smugglers para ituro sa kanila ng itong mga smugglers na ito kung saan yung way papunta doon sa country na yon. So parang itong mga smugglers is ito yung mga tour guide. So sila yung mga tour guide sa mga ganitong process. So many have used this route, including migrants from Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, Libya, Lebanon, Eritrea, and the Palestinian territories and Iran. Among those that suffer in this are those who have a legitimate reason to seek asylum in Greece. In fact, Greece has been criticized by the European Union for not dealing adequately with the issue of asylum seekers, whereas one of the European Union rules is that the first country reached by an immigrant is the one that is supposed to deal with asylum issues. So, one of the European Union rules is that kung ano man yung first na mapuntahan nitong mga immigrants is dapat sila bigyan ng chance to dapat sila bigyan ng asylum or chance. So, pero ang Greece, hindi nila ito ginagawa. Instead, those illegal immigrants who are caught are put in detention for 3 months and then forced to leave Greece within 30 days. So, kitang-kita na dito na walang chance talaga yung mga illegal immigrants dito sa Greece because kinukulong sila ng 3 months rather, and then they were gonna be reported. So, what is even sadder here is that they work hard, made sacrifices, went through very dangerous places, and endured 7 days in the Sahara, spent month in grim camp in Libya, suffered a terrifying voyage across the Mediterranean, and then they even paid several $1,000s for the journey for the lawyers and smugglers. But eventually, when they are caught, they will be imprisoned in a cramped and stingy warehouse on the islands of Samos. So, wala na talagang chance. So, yet, the larger of illegal immigrants still make it to Europe as well as to the US. In the end, these barriers will not keep out those who are desperate to get this destination. Even up until now na 2021, mayroon mga illegal immigrants talaga na ginagawa pa rin ito. So, even though there's mga borders, may mga wall na ilagay pa dyan, they can stop them for emigrating. Kasi, ang purpose ng mga taong ito is to survive. Kasi, sabi ko nga, poverty yung pinaka first reason kung bakit gusto nila mag-emigrate sa isang country, kasi hindi nila mabuhay yung family nila. May possible na mamatay sila sa kanilang sariling country. So, how there is one evidence of a decline of illegal immigration in Europe, especially those coming from Africa. So, may nangyayari, especially yung mga coming from Africa, may nangyayari na discrimination. So, however, the issue is whether the decline will continue in the long term or whether it is nothing more than a blip on the otherwise upward trend in immigration from Africa. The latter appears more likely given the problems seemingly endemic to Africa: warfare, poverty, and ethnic and religious conflict. One immigrant from Hartford said, "We were already dead when we were in Sudan and Libya. If we died on the boat, it's all the same." So, whether they can't make it to Greece or in other country, still tuloy pa rin yung kanilang paglalakbay just to survive. So, whether sila ay mamatay papunta doon or mamatay sila papunta doon, it's okay for them kasi back in their country, matagal na silang patay kasi walang chance na mabuhay sila, even their family. So, yun lang po, and thank you for listening.